Hello, welcome to the Bonsai Stuff podcast and the final episode of the Deciduous Development series, part 4. It's time to put a bow on and wrap it up. I'm Scott Martin from Bonsai Matsu. As always, I appreciate the company, appreciate the support. And Deciduous Development, it's been interesting. It's lovely for me to look back on what I do, how I do it, the reasons for it, and put it into words. Often with teaching or explaining, showing things, it's about that, exactly that, showing things, physically seeing it. But a podcast is very different. I've got to put into words processes and hopefully inspire you and provide some kind of a resource that's valuable that you can then take forward and use with your deciduous and your development of your bonsai anywhere around the world, because a lot of it's applicable no matter what your seasonality or your location, anything like that, which is just perfect. So in this episode, I want to wrap up by talking about styling and shaping strategies that I use. Should be interesting. There's a few key points that I'll make out of this that hopefully roll forward. Things like the bud conveyor get brought up again and again and again, but also different methodologies for use for styling and shaping, and it should be interesting. It's a lovely time of the year at the moment, this early spring period, except for the change with a lot of wind that seem to be experiencing. But I look at the forecast temperatures around the country, and one side's getting close to 30 degrees already in the west, and I look over towards the east, and there's still minus temperatures overnight. So it's still frost city in places like Canberra. So it's unusual. You've got to adjust whatever it is that you're doing in your local area, in your yard, based on what you're experiencing. And it's so hard and so difficult to set a hard and fast rule. Muppets like me get on and say, remove your shade cloth and put your trees out in the open. It's good to get some exposure to the elements, and then suddenly you get minus 4 degrees overnight. Or, you've removed your shade cloth, you've got this fine, delicate growth, and suddenly you've got near 30-degree temperatures, which possibly the foliage may not be ready for just yet. So just be mindful that while we're in this transition period for our seasons, that we've got to be very careful. Anyway, enough of that. Let's get into this last part 4 Deciduous Development podcast. When it comes to shaping, styling, manipulating, designing your bonsai, there's clearly 2 primary methods. I'm sure there's others, but the primary ones that we use are wiring and the clip and grow method. So I'm just going to break those down a little bit for deciduous and how I use them, and some caution areas, I suppose, for these things. Now, you've got to have, before you start anything when it comes to design work on your bonsai, you need to have a plan. You need to have some kind of target that you're trying to achieve, because just simply whacking wire on a tree and bending branches or shaping a trunk, whatever, that's a real short-term gain that I think you'll pay the price for somewhere in the future. So you really need to have an idea. It doesn't need to be in concrete, but it has to be pretty consistent. You have to have some kind of pen on paper moment where you look at it and go, okay, I am going to try and achieve this with this tree. So therefore you apply your wire a certain way, and you'll bend, you'll twist, you'll manipulate, whatever it is that you do. But for me, I like the wiring to be used firstly on, say, a trunk. That's a really nice way of doing, getting some movement in there, as long as a few key elements are met before I apply the wire. The tree that I'm looking to use, or the trunk line that I'm looking to use, has to have taper. It has to go from thicker at the base to thinner at the top. And it doesn't really matter to me how small the tree is, or what age that whip is that I'm wiring, or the trunk that I'm shaping. I want to have taper. So if I look up a trunk line and I see that it's consistently the same thickness, it might be that it's sort of, the 7-8 mil thickness all the way up to the top of the tree, the height that I've determined that I want the tree to be at, then just wiring that will not fix my problem. I'm always going to have that 8mm trunk line that's going to consistently get thicker and thicker and thicker, and it becomes that sausage. It's the same thickness all the way up. It's boring. It's something that I know based on my experience I will look back on in 10 years, 15 years and go, you know what, I really shouldn't have done that. No, I shouldn't have created a twisty sausage. I should have gone for something that's got taper in it, because taper is really important no matter how tall your tree is. It's one of the most important aspects for your trunk that you'll get. And deciduous trees, you'll find that taper is a key because of the winter silhouette. You might find that when you've got, a conifer that maintains its foliage, or an evergreen, whatever, that possibly taper isn't quite as important. Look at any photos for pines that have been styled, that have been collected in the wild anywhere, through Europe or whatever, and look at follow the trunk line and try and see if there's taper on it. Often there's not, and you can hide things away when there's consistent foliage throughout the whole year. But deciduous, it's very different, because we lose that foliage, which means that taper is something that's got to be focused on from day one. Absolute day one. So if I'm looking to wire and I pick my trunk line and I get a complete lack of taper, I'm dealing with a sausage, then I've got to look at some kind of a cut point somewhere down that trunk. And that leads me into the second part. So we've got wire for developing and designing our trunk, but we've also got the clip and grow. So you can have a trunk line that's very straight. Somewhere halfway up along the height, there's a nice bud that's grown out from the side of it. It may be to a good thickness. It might just be a tiny little bud, but you can always cut back to that bud, and that can give you the new angle and new leader for that deciduous. It really doesn't matter at this point how thick or big it is, but choosing that trunk line very early allows you to get that taper forced into the tree, because that bud is always going to be, when it develops into the future trunk, is always going to be thinner than the base that's supporting it. All right, so that's a way we can force in the taper into the tree. But when I'm working with my trees and I'm styling them and I'm thinking, okay, so is it wire or is it clip and grow? Which one should I go for? And there's definitely people that have preferences out there. People that don't like wire. People that don't like to wait with clip and grow. I'm saying that I think we should use both, or you should use both. And it might be that with wiring the trunk, that was your step one. Then I get to my primary branches, and rather than letting them grow all over the shop, I'll wire the primary branches. And once I get past my primary branches, then I start moving into the clip and grow method of developing the structure. For me, and natural is not a word that that gets thrown around a lot by me with bonsai, but I feel that the vibe, the feel of the bonsai, by using that methodology, wiring the trunk, wiring the primaries, then pruning to get the shape that I want, feels nicer. It has a less manipulated feel for me than if I'd wired every secondary branch and then wire every tertiary branch and then keep everything, within the structure, wired within an inch of its life. You can do it. You definitely can do it. And I'm just saying that my personal preference is to wire the trunk, wire the primary branches, then move on to clip and grow for my deciduous. Basically, almost all of I think all of my trees fall into that category at most points. The pines might be a little bit different, but for the vast majority of my trees, I move along that scale of from wiring to pruning only. And another thing, I also find that by the stage I'm at that ramification point or doing the fine, detailed, twiggy growth, there's just too much happening with the trees. And to get in there and wire with my clumsy hands, I'm going to be doing more damage than good. And not only putting it off, I've got to be able to take that wire off at some point as well. And I find that there can be a massive setback when it comes to that wire removal. So for me, wiring initially and then moving to clip and grow. So there's times when I don't like wiring trunks, and where there's a real caution point when it comes to wiring deciduous, and it comes down to the scarring side of things. If you've worked with natives, Australian natives, or you've worked with pines, there's times when that scarring, and it's not always, there are exceptions, but times when that scarring really doesn't make much of a difference. It might be, I'm talking about mild scarring, not talking about those deep gouges or anything like that. I'm just talking about really mild scarring. You get that mild scarring, on most trees except for cedars, but you get that scarring, and it's okay. You can live with it. You sort of go, oh, really, I'd left it on a bit long, but it's okay. When it comes to deciduous, you've got to be so careful, so careful. That scarring, if it's wrapped around a trunk, you may know it yourself. You'll see, for instance, the green trunk of a young Japanese maple that's been wired around the trunk. It's left on a little bit long, gouges in just a little bit, and then where that wire was turns into a grey band that goes around the tree right from the bottom to the top. It starts to age and mature a bit quicker than the rest of the trunk, so the rest of the trunk stays this green colour, and you've got this wire scar that you're looking at. So I'm extremely mindful that I try and avoid as much as possible scarring on deciduous from wire. You've got to be so careful with it. And with wiring, you've got to know when to wire and when not to wire, when to hold them, when to fold them. Because if you're wiring a growing tree at the wrong time of the year, you'll find that you'll be doing a lot of damage. There'll be cracking, there'll be breaking, things will just snap off in your hands. Now, I use an analogy when I talk about wiring, especially during this early spring period. If you've got a hose that's got no water in it, it's nice and pliable, it's a flexible hose, and you want to coil that up on the ground into a nice circle. When there's no water in it and it's nice and warm, that hose just goes around and around nice and easily, stacks up beautifully, perfect, no stress whatsoever. You fill that hose with water and you block each end of it and you try and bend that hose, it's going to kink immediately. Now think about your deciduous in exactly the same vein. When there's fluid flowing through the vascular tissue, through the hose network inside that tree, and it's flooding like the tree's supercharged. It's been dormant, it's been asleep. All of a sudden it wakes up, starts to grow a bucket load of roots, starting to push all this foliage. It's jumping out of its skin. You put wire on the thing, and suddenly you try and bend it, and the next thing you know, you'll hear this like snap, and more than likely you'll have a piece of foliage and branch in one hand and wire in the other. You've got to be so careful. If you are in a position where you must wire during this spring period, and I say the word must because I avoid it at every chance I can get. If you want to do it, and if you're in a position where you're like, I really should put some wire on this, be very careful. Very careful. Applying the wire, apply it firmly but gently. Make sure that where you are doing the bend, that wire is 100% on the outside of the bend. That is the only chance that you have. If that wire is on the inside of the bend at this time of the year, with all that fluid gushing through the tree, you will snap it. If you don't snap it, you'll break it at best. If you do break it, as always, just try and bend the branch back into position, put a bit of cut paste over it, try and let it heal off. Hopefully it does if it's not too bad a break, but it's a risk that you take at this time of the year. And I find that early autumn, when the tree does have another growth period, it starts to really push before it starts pulling nutrients back in from the foliage. It's a dangerous time to be wiring the tree. So for me at this time of the year, thinking that okay, wiring's pretty much close to being off the cards, off the table. I can't do it. My preference at this time of the year is to look at the tree, and if something needs to be cut, okay, it's a clip and grow. Which way do I want this tree to grow? Where are the buds? Where's the bud facing best that I want? Now I'll just quickly throw that in. When you do the clip and grow, the last leaf or the last pair of leaves, depending on the variety or species that you're dealing with, where you cut the leaf closest to the cut site, that bud activates and that becomes the future direction. And the bud generally grows in the direction the leaf is growing currently. So if you look and the bud is facing out to the right-hand side, you cut it just past that bud, maybe 2, 3, 4 mil, something like that, just leave a little bit of stub for dieback. Then the future of that branch will be going out to the right-hand side. If the bud is on the bottom side of the branch, then the branch is going to start growing down, which sounds funny because you're told remove all the downward buds. Sometimes if you've got a branch that's growing in an upward fashion, by cutting it there with that bud on the downward side, then you can start to bring that branch down in a natural looping arc. For a deciduous, it looks beautiful. I love it. So don't always just get rid of, don't always eliminate the downward buds when you're developing your structure on your deciduous, because you may be able to get that continuity of flow of branch. Rather than the branch continuing to go up, 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 you can suddenly grab one of these down buds, cut to that, and then the branch starts to swing down. So you've got to be really careful for wiring. Clip and grow is better at this time of the year, but it's not completely off the cards. Just be very, very careful. And if you are going to bend something, nice and slow. Let things start to stretch out. Don't do it fast. When that hose is full of water and you try and bend it really fast, it's going to kink immediately. If you try and bend it really slowly, you might get a nice gentle arc on it. I wouldn't go for any sharp, exaggerated bends at this time of the year. And while we're talking about wiring and pruning and clip and grow and direction of branches and stuff like that, one of the big styling considerations that I have, not just deciduous, but it applies definitely to deciduous, is branch angle consistency. And I've talked about it before on the podcast. I talk about it almost every day when I talk about designing trees. It's okay, so where's your front? Where's your height? What are the branches doing? What are the primary branches going to do on this tree? Is it an up and out? Is it a down and dirty? What sort of angle are you going to go for? Because don't say you, because you can do whatever you want when it comes to design. What I try and do with my deciduous when I'm designing them is to think before I start applying wire, before I start manipulating things. Okay, so how do I get these branches so it feels like the tree is growing the same way? Like it's got the same feel about the whole tree. Do the branches all start going up slightly on a sort of 15-degree angle and then start to come down? Do they go up maybe more? Do they go like on maybe a 45-degree angle to really give that up and out, like like a flame sort of feel on the tree? Or do I want to look at maybe them coming down and then back up again? Like what's the feel that I'm going for with this tree? Because I don't want different branches at different points on the tree doing completely different things. I don't want a branch that's sort of horizontal and then the one above that is going up at a 45-degree angle and then the one above that is coming down, maybe 15-degree angle. I want it so the tree has the same feel, like it's growing in the same fashion all the way along. And there's no right or wrong, whether it's down and dirty or up and out. It's just got to be something that's consistent for the whole tree. So when you're applying wire and when you're shaping and when you're doing whatever you're doing with your deciduous, just make sure that with your styling strategy, your shaping strategy, that you are making sure that it's consistent across the whole tree. Otherwise, you'll find that somewhere down the track, you'll be removing, you'll be trying to bend these things and trying to get something that's going up quite acutely bent down is going to end up with a bit of a dog leg on the bend, and that's something that I think you should try and avoid. All right, so let's wrap this puppy up. And I reckon that I've saved the best till last. So the bud conveyor is one of those things that is becoming, I'm feeling it's becoming common vocabulary for people that talk to me anyway about bonsai. Like it's a great concept. I love it. It's one of those things that once you can sort of visualize it, it just changes or can help with your strategy for developing your trees. And it doesn't matter what varieties. It really helps by that thought of sunlight and air getting into those inner areas. New buds start to grow in closer to the trunk. It means that you've got a great option to shorten, lengthening branches, but it provides that consistency or that feel that the future design or the integrity of the design for that bonsai in front of you is viable forever. It means that you don't have to worry about reshaping. It's like, well, I love this design. So if I keep the bud conveyor going, then, I can keep this tree like this forever. I'm not forced to do something that I don't want to do. And it's a light bulb moment. Well, now, the next part that I'm going to talk about is going to be discussing another method, another approach that's going to give you the same sort of, hopefully, light bulb moment. So when it comes to your deciduous, remember this phase. If it's too long, if it's too thick, if it's too coarse, cut it off. That's it. I use that every single time I work on almost all of my bonsai, but it's so relevant when it comes to my deciduous that I will be sitting there, and I've been through the pinching process recently with some advanced maples, day after day after day, pinching. You think you've got them all, go out the next day, and there's new growth everywhere on the tree. It's like, where are these buds coming from? Anyway, so as I'm working my way through, I was with a customer the other day where things, 2 days had been missed with pinching on these maples, and all of a sudden the internode length had pushed out significantly. It'd gone from maybe a centimetre or something like that to 5-6 centimetres right around the apex of the tree, and the growth had got so thick as well that you could just see that pinching wasn't the right answer. So I was cutting off, and this fella said to me, "What are you cutting it off like? It's brand new. Aren't we trying to keep that growth?" I said, if it's too long, it's too thick, it's too coarse, it's got to go, because if you don't cut that now, if you don't eliminate it the very next time that you see it on that tree, what's going to happen is it's going to start to develop, and you're going to get further bud growth, maybe next year, or a second flush of growth, whatever it is. But the next lot of growth is going to be that far away from the silhouette of the tree, from the structure of the tree, that you're going to end up coming back and cutting it off anyway. Why waste the tree's resources keeping something that's going to get cut off later on? And, it may be that you don't cut it off for 3 or 4 years. So therefore there's not just one branch that you're looking cutting off. There's all this substructure that's on there as well, that most likely, if it's too coarse, too many resources are going to go to that section of the tree, which means all that new growth is going to be thick and coarse as well. So you're going to have this growth that's going to be a long way out. Your tree is going to start getting, quite extended growth, and we want it nice and compact. You get to, stage 4 ramification of your trees. You want that growth to be really nice and compressed in on the trees. That's what the beautiful bonsai are about. Fine, delicate ramification, nice and close to the tree, beautiful trunk line, lovely primary branches. Why would you want this growth that's thick and coarse and sticking out a long way? So, it might be 3-4 years down the track, when your confidence builds and you look at the tree and go, you know what, that's really got to go. Snip, you cut it off. Then you've got a hole in the foliage. Really, if you'd made a decision that, and be honest, that you knew you should have made all those years ago, as soon as you first saw that new growth come out in spring, when you were doing that initial pinching, your bonsai would be so much further along the track. And that's the difference between a lot of deciduous that I see, that I get to work with, that come through my workshop, that I look at and think, you haven't made a decision. You've stalled on making the decision. And by the time it comes to the point where you say, look, I really think this should go, it's like, of course it's got to go. It's way too long, so let's remove it. Okay, so now what we've got to do is use the next 4 or 5 years to develop the other structure around that area that you've just cut out to come back in. So here it is again. Too long, too thick, too coarse, cut it off. Simple, easy. Don't overcomplicate it. Don't look for excuses or reasons why. That internode length is everything on deciduous. It's absolutely everything. And if the distance between the buds, the internode length is too great, chances are it's never going to get better. Never, ever. Always look back further along the tree as to what you can cut off. And it's normally bonsai that are somewhere in that mixed mid-range of development. It definitely does happen on older trees, but nowhere near as frequently as those bonsai that suddenly you're ticking the box going, okay, now I'm transitioning from from stage 3 where I'm working on my secondary branches into that ramification. So you just, you health check, you look at it, happy with everything. All right, so I'm just going to pinch like crazy. And you start removing all the new growth. Then you get to the point where some years, maybe it's after a fresh repot when they're jumping out of their skin. Maybe your fertilising is a bit heavy. Maybe the tree's just jumping out of its skin because it's a strong, healthy tree. There can be no rhyme or reason for it. And suddenly you get these long shoots coming out as well as the more fine, delicate ones. You're pinching, you're on top of it. Every day you're out there with your fine tweezers and you're taking out the tips. But for some reason, some of them shoot away or they continue to grow and get too thick and coarse. So you go out, you pinch today, everything looks great. You go out another couple of days later and you have a look and go, that internode length has continued to grow. So it's now got too long, too thick, too coarse. What are you going to do? You're going to switch from your fine tweezers where you're doing the pinching, get your scissors out and cut it off. And back your decision, back your judgment. You'll definitely know looking at your tree when you're up close and personal to it and you're really getting in there, you're doing all this work, especially at this time of the year. Doesn't mean it has to be this time of the year, but it's likely that it's this time of the year that you will know, you will be able to identify those shoots that have taken off. It might be, and this is common, it might also be that you look at last year's growth that you've left and suddenly it's too long and you look along that branch and go, oh, really, I didn't cut back to the first pair of leaves, or I didn't cut to the second or third, I cut to the 5th or 6th leaf, so I've really got this long branch that's now starting to get way longer. All right, so what are you going to do about that? If it's too long, too thick, too coarse, what's the option? Cut it off, remove it, or reduce it back. If there's buds further back on a branch that you look at that you know is too long and you are in this final stage of developing ramification on your trees, you have to reduce it. You have to reduce it. And if there are buds there, then it's most likely that you avoided making a decision or something got beyond what you saw when you were working on it. Don't be hard on yourself, but it's normally because you haven't pruned it back as hard as what you should have last time. I'd use that definitely as a guide or as a lesson or something that you can use going forward to say, hey, next time I'm not going to let that happen. I'm not going to have it where this tree is. I'm working on it and suddenly I'm going backwards and backwards and backwards, because that's what it feels like when you're working on your tree. When you're suddenly going, oh, God, I've got to cut that branch off. Oh, I've got to cut that branch back. I've got to cut that branch back. Suddenly you get back to a plucked chook and there's not much on it. It's like, why are you there? Why? What's happened to the tree? What's forcing all this big, long, thick, coarse new growth? Or why wasn't it cut back last time? Sometimes it's because you've missed it. Other times it's the fertilizing strategy. Other times it's, maybe it's just been freshly repotted, so it's rampant. It could be a number of things that's happening with it. Maybe the tree's not getting enough sunlight. Maybe it's in a position where it's pushing that internode length out further and further and further because it's reaching for sun. That's definitely, so it might not be that it's excessively strong and healthy. It could be that it's sort of going, hey, I need something here. You need to look after me. Otherwise, this is the best you're going to get. You're not going to get tight, compact growth on a tree that gets 1 or 2 hours of sunlight per day. That's just not going to happen. So I think that if you can keep in the back of your toolkit when you are working on your trees, and not just deciduous, but specifically keep this for your deciduous, too long, too thick, too coarse, cut it off. Do something about it. Don't leave it sit there. Don't delay the decision. The longer you leave it, the more you procrastinate, the more you think, no, it'll be okay, it'll get better in the future. The longer you do that for, the longer you delay the development of that tree for. It's not going to get better by itself, guaranteed, but it may get better if you make that decision. The tough decision now to remove something will pay dividends in the long run, especially for that fine, detailed ramification that is just the perfection. It's the icing on the cake for your deciduous. Well, that puts a bow on Deciduous Development, a 4-part series on the Bonsai Stuff podcast. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. A lot of what's talked about in there applies to a lot of different varieties and natives, exotics, whatever. But in particular, I think that this is the format or the roadmap that I use for developing my deciduous. There's so many different techniques and different approaches to things, and I think it's a matter of knowing when to apply and when not to apply. And that's where, experience comes into it, yes, but also the bonsai network, the people around you that you are part of your bonsai crew that you can talk to, that you can reach out to say, hey, listen, what do you think? Or people like me or other people around the world that you look at that have got beautiful deciduous bonsai, if that's the target, reach out to them. You see them at a show, ask about it, see if you can speak to the owner. How have you done this? What's been your plan? What have you developed? All the different things, because a lot of things apply specifically to your local area, to even your microclimate. I met with over an intensive recently. We were talking about where deciduous in my yard were to someone who's sort of 15 minutes down the road, not that far, but their microclimate is very different to mine. So timing on things, and this is where the bonsai calendar, greyness comes in. That I don't profess to love the bonsai calendars. It's nice to have a general idea, but you need to work these things within the parameters of your environment. But a lot of stuff like, knowing that the tree's growing fiercely and wiring at that time when it's growing fiercely is a danger. It's a risk that you take of cracking or snapping, anything like that. That applies no matter where you are, but knowing the timing for it, whether it's right now or whether it's in another week or 2 weeks or whether it was 2 weeks ago when they first started growing, whatever it is, a lot of this stuff you have to put into your own world, your own bonsai world that you've created, and it varies. And taking specific date advice for anything is dangerous, but it's something that you can use and manipulate. Anyway, I think deciduous, when you see them in their ultimate glory, that winter silhouette, as I've said before, I work so hard throughout this period, getting up on benches and pinching and bringing trees in and out of the workshop on a regular basis, big heavy trees, carrying them, like, oh, bloody hell, I wish this pinching thing would end. But I know that while I'm doing it, that next winter, which it's a long way away, it's sort of 9 months away before I'll get to see them when I want to, but I know by doing all this hard work now, I'm going to have such a praise of the structure of the tree, and I'm going to have that smile. I'm smiling now as I'm saying it, because I know that doing stuff now with my trees, doing this maintenance work, the stuff that's, let's face it, pinching maples for an hour on end, it's there's a better way to spend your time. But I know that when I get to the point in 9 months' time and I get to see that tree again, it's going to be, that's why you've done it. That's exactly why you've done it. So much of what we do in this maintenance mode for our bonsai, it's not for now. It's for somewhere down the track, and it's beautiful. Having trees that are always being developed, you miss out on those more mature trees that the maintenance work is very different from developmental work, and getting to that last stage, which is what this podcast is all about, is that very last part, that too long, too thick, too coarse. That sort of thing, it makes a big difference, and it does definitely put a smile on your face. Anyway, look out for the pests around the yard there. I've raised it a few times. The caterpillars seem to be going rampant. And a lot of trees that I've seen have had caterpillars on them, so be on the front foot. Don't let them destroy all your hard work that you're going through. Watch the watering, keep the fertilising up. It's almost time for another dose of the teabag fertiliser for me, so make sure you're ready for it. Don't let it catch you by surprise. Thanks for listening in. As always, until next time, happy bonsai.